Welcome to the last episode of the Corporate Survivor podcast with MEI PHING this year. So this is MEI PHING. Now, this podcast has been around for almost 5 years. And I remember in the early days, in the end of 2020 and 2021, I used to do this episode called like the top 10 biggest wins of the year. And that allowed me to have an honest and maybe slightly uncomfortable reflection and conversation with myself on some of the things that I think I did well and some of the things that I think I want to improve in the upcoming 12 months. Now, that was something that I did in the first 2 years. Then over the past 2 years, I don't exactly remember why I stopped recording and reflecting on these episodes, but this year I really want to kind of like bring back this tradition. And also, at the beginning of the year, I did a New Year strategy session with my corporate survivor members, and we actually went through how to improve their personal as well as professional lives in 5 categories. So that's career, wealth, health, relationship, and lifestyle. So since I got my members and students to reflect every single month for the year, I thought why not just actually wrap it up and also share my personal thoughts and my personal reflections for this entire year as well. So I'm recording this episode for myself because I want to refer back to this in the next 365 days. I'm recording this episode for my corporate survivor members who have been journeying with me every single month in our monthly mentoring calls, tracking their progress. I want to share my own progress with them as well. And I'm recording this episode for you. And hopefully you can take some inspiration and some empowerment from some of the lessons that I have learned, my reflections, whether it's directly or indirectly. I think that will be super duper helpful. So, as you know, I am a career coach, career mentor right now. So I consider this sort of like my full-time job, my career, and therefore this will then fit into the career category. And I have a podcast, I have a blog, newsletter, I have like free guides, free resources, and a career program as well. So there are quite a few things. And for each and every of this category, I want to share, like I said, what I think I've done well, what I think I could have done better, and maybe some of the lessons learned. So since we're on this podcast, then let me start by sharing about this podcast. Now, this podcast has been around for almost 5 years. So I won't go through the entire journey, and I'll talk about it in the 5-year anniversary. However, for this episode, I think, especially in the last 12 months, I think the biggest change, I think the biggest positive change that I've made with the podcast is making it more authentic and more honest to the actual perspectives that I want to share. So moving away from what I feel are more YouTube-y or clickbaity sort of like high level tips that is so common that everyone else is talking about, but gradually moving it towards just sharing perspectives, giving you some insights, giving you, more importantly, context that you can actually really understand the points and understand the insights. And the other thing I've also specifically done is to record my episodes in one shot. So there'll be no editing, it's just me clicking record and sharing my thoughts, giving examples, and hoping that you can apply it and take away as much as possible from it. So I think this, to me, brings me a little bit closer to the actual purpose and intention of why I created this podcast back in February of 2020. Because at that time, I just picked up my phone and just started recording the thoughts I had in my mind around the corporate world, the working world, relationships with bosses, and how to manage your work and stuff like that. So there wasn't really like a strategy or like it wasn't even on YouTube at the time. So I just said what I wanted to say. I just shared what I wanted to share, and I feel like over time I lost track a little bit of what inspired me to start the podcast in the first place. So this year, definitely, I think moving back to my roots, I think that has been super duper helpful. Then there was another thing that I did with the podcast as well. So I created a blog version for every single episode of the podcast. Because one of the things that I hear from my community members is that, oh, maybe, is there any way that I can look into like some of the key highlights from each episode? If I just want to have like a TLDR version, like a 1-minute version, where can I get that? And I thought, yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'm like, why don't I have that? Because even though my podcast episodes are usually a little bit shorter And it's shorter on purpose because I want to make sure that there is a clear point and you are actually able to take away. I mean, I don't really believe in recording 2-3 hours podcast and then you listen to it and then you feel good and then you end up, not implementing a single thing that I'm saying. So one of the feedback that I got was, hey, is there any way that, there's like a TLDR version? And I thought, amazing. So for all 200 plus episodes, I created like a blog version and you will be able to see at www.meiping.com. So when you click on the podcast links for each episode, you can find the TLDR version with some of the top takeaways as well as the timestamp so that you can jump forward if you want. However, I still think that the context that the depth I'm able to go into in a podcast episode is still something that I really value as well. So definitely, I think that is the win, the good part of the podcast. Now, the thing that I think I didn't really do well with the podcast this year definitely is consistency, because I started the year really well. There was episodes every single week up to maybe was it May or June. Then I dropped the ball and I got busy with other stuff and I abandoned the podcast here and there. And sometimes when I decide to make an episode, then it's again inconsistent. So I had a consistency problem with the podcast episode. So I think it's kind of like I need inspiration to record the podcast. And I'm also an introvert. So sometimes when I feel like I'm really, really low energy that week, then I just don't record an episode, which is definitely not good if you're a listener. And it's definitely not good from a consistency standpoint as well. So that's something that I definitely want to improve on next year to make sure that if there are weekly episodes, then you can expect a weekly episode from the Corporate Survivor podcast. Then I think the other thing I think the podcast I didn't really do very well definitely is promoting the podcast. So I've seen some people do like all these like shorts, and some people are so good at promoting their podcast. And this is definitely something I have not mastered yet. So right now, the podcast, which I'm definitely thankful for, is growing every single day. So thanks to you for sharing these episodes with your friends. I really, really appreciate it. Like I said, this is definitely an area that I think I could do better in the next year, probably sharing a little bit more on my social media on these new episodes. I think that's something that I could improve as well. So those are the ones. Then let's move on to the next category. The next category would be the newsletter. So I have a newsletter and it's a free newsletter. Now here, I think it's been a hot mess. To be honest, the newsletter has been a hot mess. Not because I didn't try, but I think it has been a huge space that I've been using for experimentation, in which if you actually subscribe to my newsletter, you'll notice that it is really like an experimental space where I have like different stuff that's like going on. There's like reflections, there's like stories, and sometimes it's just some thoughts, and then sometimes it's new podcast episodes, and sometimes there's just promotions and stuff like that. So I think it's been a little bit messy, and I haven't quite found my cadence, and I think more importantly, what I really wanted to achieve with each edition of the newsletter. And this is something that is still on my mind as well. So definitely next year, consistency with the newsletter is important for sure. But I think even before consistency, then there is a need for like for myself, real clarity around the direction that I want to take the newsletter in. And honestly, this is very similar to your career as well. Like, I mean, you can work hard, but if you don't really know what the purpose of this particular piece of work is, then it's going to be a mess as well. So I think before I start sending more newsletters, definitely I'm going to take a little bit of time to think about the direction I want to take it in, and I think the purpose and the style. I know it sounds a little bit abstract because it's a little bit hard for me to articulate this because in my mind it's not very clear yet. So yeah, for sure. The newsletter has been a hot mess this year. Definitely, I've tried a lot of stuff, but it's just that I feel like I haven't quite come to a point or a style or a kind of like intentionality that I really wanted with the newsletter. I don't feel like I've nailed it yet. So this is something that I definitely want to finalize and like kind of figure out in the next 12 months. So I don't want this newsletter to be I don't want to keep using the word hot mess, but that's really how I feel about it, at least right now. Okay, the next thing. So I have a free PDF guide. So it's like a 5-day career growth guide and accompanying training that I've made available for over a year now. So I won't say that this is something that is like totally new, but I think the good thing that I've introduced with the free guide this year was actually an email. Instead, in fact, it's a 5-day email that helps you go through step by step in terms of like career clarity, work confidence, competence, um, value positioning, and personal branding. So this year, while I didn't change the free PDF guide or the training because both of it are extremely popular with so many people, so I didn't change any of that. But what I did was just really added on to make sure that when you download the 5-day career growth guide, and if you want it, you can get it at www.meiphing.com. You also get the email course. So it's like a 5-day email course that explains a little bit more on the concepts I'm talking about and sharing my personal stories. So better help you understand what I'm sharing with you in terms of the 5-step for career growth if you're working in a 9 to 5 career. So the email course, I would say like the 5-day email actually has been received really, really well. And in fact, there were many people who signed up for the 5-day course, ended up joining the Corporate Survivor because they found that the 5-day course and together with the video training and the PDF actually gave them a lot more context on actually what they wish they would have known when they started their career. So this was something that, in fact, one of the Corporate Survivor members texted me today and told me that this was something that he thought his boss or his HR was supposed to teach him and guide him on, but it turns out it wasn't the case. And after he downloaded the free guide, he kind of got a better idea on my perspective and the angle of my teaching and strategies, and he signed up for the program. And right now he's only in the program for the past 2 weeks, but he's really enjoying it so much, and he's actually listening to the videos every single day. But anyway, back to the 5-day guide. So while it wasn't completely new, like the 5-day guide is not completely new, but definitely the daily email training, like the 5-day training, is new. So if you have previously downloaded the 5-day guide and you haven't kind of like gone through the email training yet, then you can re-download it at www.meiphing.com. You can reassess it, then you'll receive an email every single day. It's an email training, so you can use it together with the PDF guide as well as the video training as well. So I think that's the thing that I think I did well. Again, just to wrap up, what I think I didn't do that well with the free guide is definitely talk about it more. Talk about it more. I record so many podcast episodes, but as I listen to some of my past episodes, I realized that like, why am I not talking about the free guide? Like so many people have found it valuable. So why am I not talking about it? So again, it's back to me maybe not really mentioning the hard work that I've put in. So one of the things that I always tell my clients is that if you're working hard, then you really need to make sure that you're getting visible and you're talking about it so that you get recognized for your hard work. And that's why I'm talking about it right now. And this is something that I think that I could have done better. If I've created the guide, the training, the email training, and everybody loves it and find it super duper helpful, then it's like, why am I not talking about it? So here's me talking about it right now. So this is something that definitely I want to improve on in the next year. Okay, moving on to the next thing. What's the next thing I have? So the Corporate Survivor. So the Corporate Survivor is my career program for 9 to 5 professionals, for experienced professionals, as well as for fresh graduates. So this program has been around since I created it in 2021. So let's start with what I think went well with the program this year. So I think this year, I'm actually really, really happy. I think the many members that joined the program this year are exactly the kind of like people that I created this program for. So to be more specific, it's for the people who feel like they want to learn all the rules about the corporate world. They want to learn how to navigate the corporate world. And maybe they're new to the working world, or maybe they've been working for some time, but they still feel like, I don't really feel I get it. I feel like I'm surviving at work every day, but I feel like something's missing. I feel like I'm working hard, but how come I'm not getting recognized? I don't really feel I'm getting the rewards or the recognition that I want. And I'm really doing everything that I know, but I feel like there's something missing. And I think this year, many students who joined actually told me that maybe I'm so glad I found you on social media, because this is really something that I feel like I needed. And it took a very long time for me to find a program and like to find a coach who is offering, like navigating your career, right, meeting bosses' expectations, how to actually sell a value and get opportunities. So this is something that for sure I think is a big win for the program this year. Now, in the program itself, I have the course lessons, but I also have like the monthly Q&A calls as well as one-on-one coaching calls. So maybe I'll talk about what I think went well with the monthly Q&A calls. I think personally, this is really the best thing about the program. So I created the monthly Q&A calls to better support my members in implementing the lessons taught, but it's also for me to kind of like give them some guidance on their latest career, workplace, or job search situation. So I created this in 2022, just a few months after I created the corporate survivor program, like the actual sort of training itself. And initially, when I created that, I really didn't expect much. However, now that it's been more than 2 years, I think what we have really built up, it's a huge library of tons of like real life Q&As and like real life situations of members. I think we have more than 100 situations right now. And in fact, aside from me seeing my members every single month live, participating in our live Zoom calls and sharing their progress every single month, sharing their wins, their success, and to train their critical thinking when assessing another member's career challenges, and really them putting themselves in the shoes of the other members and really challenging themselves to think how they would approach the situation if that happened to them. So I can really see the growth by the members who have been actively participating in the monthly calls. I can also see the growth for members, even though they don't attend, but they listen to the recordings and they take notes as well. So these are some things that I think definitely have gone really well. Now, the thing that I think I could have done better with the monthly mentoring calls, I think it's not so much about the content, because everybody is so happy. I think the thing that I think I could have done better is maybe just sending more reminders to my members to actually leverage this mentoring library. So right now, if you join the Corporate Survivor, you get 12 months. So you get 12 months of Q&A support, guidance to navigate your career, work, and job search situation together. Obviously, the lessons in the Corporate Survivor. So in terms of support, you get 12 months. And the other thing, I think for the existing members, I'm also really happy about is to see members who want to continue beyond the 12 months. So like I said, if you're new, you kind of like get the 12 months for free, because I want to make sure that you are supported once you join the program. However, I think what I'm really happy about is to see there are many members after completing their 12 months actually reaching out to me saying, hey, maybe how can I continue this? Like how can I continue joining these like Q&A calls? Like I want to learn from the other students, and I still want to access all these like insights in the library. Like how can I do that? So now we have like members who are on like year 2, 3, and 4 with me, which I'm really happy about. So I think for sure tons of like good things from the monthly Q&A calls. Like I said, the only thing I think I need to do differently or do better is to maybe remind more members to leverage these resources, because it's something that is so useful. So if you want to get a taster of that, you can actually sign up for the 30-day trial. So it's a 30-day access where you get access to, like I said, more than 100 real life scenarios. So you can learn how to deal with your career, work, and job search situation, actually gain direct access to my corporate world perspective. Like as someone who's a former boss, former hiring manager who has managed teams, you'll see a completely different perspective. And I was telling a student the other day that it's like once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And I think that's really the power of it. Because one of the things that my member told me this year is that maybe you don't just teach me what to do, but you teach me how to think. So I think this is where like real confidence comes in, because once you believe in yourself, then you can do anything. So anyway, so okay, that's the monthly Q&A calls. So on the other side, one of the requests that I got from many members was to have like more one-on-one coachings. So not so much every single month, but having access to one-on-one coaching, maybe on a quarterly basis or as and when members require it to navigate their challenges. So this is something that I did consider, and that's why this year I introduced a new tier to the corporate survivor that comes with quarterly coaching sessions. So this is only exclusive for those of you who want more accountability, you want more personalized support, and you want to make sure that you remain consistent, then definitely you can consider the pro plan. But otherwise, there are also options to top up the one-on-one coaching, but it's only exclusive for members. Like, it's not open to the public. The reasons why it's only exclusive to the members is because the way that I coach, there needs to be some homework to be done. And the corporate survivor, the knowledge, everything is actually taught in the course training itself. So when my members book their one-on-one call with me, they come in already having the knowledge, having the right perspectives, then we can deep dive specifically into the issue. So we're not like solving issues at a high level where, you know, everybody's going to ask the same question, stuff like that. It's not. So it's highly personalized because the requirement to go through the program, like the student has already taken the action. So I think this is, in my view, the best way to maximize the program. And well, on whether how I could do it better, honestly, I think the coaching sessions are really perfect. And if you're a corporate survivor member who has had your one-on-one call with me, I'd say that every single member I've spoken to said to me that this is one of the best things about the program. And maybe you can read my mind. So I think definitely I'm very happy about that. Now, there is definitely one thing that I think I could have done better. Not so much during the one-on-one coaching. I think it's about the one-on-one coaching, in which, as I said, there are many students who told me that, oh, the session is amazing. However, as I reflected, I realized that I'm like, how come I feel like this vibe is not really something that I could translate in my social media? I feel like this is not an excuse, but it's something that I'm actively aware and working on, is that it's kind of like tied to my background. So I used to work in corporate governance and risk management. So I used to work on a lot of like regulatory submissions. So the way that I write, and on social media, there's like a lot of writing. So the way that I write is very corporate and it's very neutral. And I realized that it doesn't work for social media. It's like, it's too soft. And people tell me that, oh, maybe, you know, your content is like, sometimes feels like it's very factual and it's very true. There's a lot of truth, but sometimes it feels like very soft. But when I speak to you, I feel like, oh, you really get what I'm saying. Like, you're so high energy. You know, I really feel I can vibe with you and stuff like that. It feels like it's not really translating in the content. And I thought it was kind of an interesting comment. So I was like scrolling my LinkedIn and Instagram the other day, and I realized that, oh, heck, like this is so true, because as I look at the content that I create, I'm like, oh, okay, this is just like me writing regulatory papers in the past, which is like everything is, you know, like there's like a certain format, there's like a certain tone to it, which is it's not exactly neutral, but it's kind of like making a point but being polite. And I realized that, okay, on social media, this is actually like the boring stuff. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the corporate world is really kind of boring, right? So, and I think that maybe the vibe of like the way that I'm writing is kind of like not helping the cause. And I think that's also a reason why, I mean, moving on to like the last category I want to talk about, which is basically my social media, which is LinkedIn and Instagram. And I think this kind of like alludes to the problem that I think I have with my social media. And if you're following me on LinkedIn, Instagram, thank you, because maybe it's someone who doesn't know what the heck I'm doing on social media. So, I mean, getting to the point, as I was saying, I think this kind of like is actually shown in a lot of my social media content. I feel like the content is very, yeah, it's like me writing a report. I don't know how to explain it in a much better way. It's just like me. It's like me writing a report, making a corporate presentation, which is totally against whatever the social media people are teaching. I feel like the vibe is not really translated. And this is something that I'm trying to figure out, like, what more I can do. And I think that's also the reason why I sometimes feel not as motivated and like not as hyped up in social media as compared to the podcast. Personally, I really, really love the format of a podcast, because I feel like we have time to go in depth. I can really explain what I mean. I can give you more context and give you some examples, because at the end of the day, like nothing is black and white. This is like 5 tips, do this I'm like, okay, this doesn't work in real life. And if you have tried it, you would know. So I think that the podcast kind of like gives me that the richness of my thought, and like, I can really expand and like make it fully clear, clearly explain what I mean. But this is something that is not really, it's not that it's not really, it's more like it's my problem. Like I don't know how to translate it. I don't know how to translate it to my Instagram and LinkedIn content. And I think this is something that I've noticed, but I have not quite found a solution yet. So this is something that I want to improve on in the next 12 months. And I'm not sure if I will kind of like find that style and kind of like move into a space that it's very rah rah rah, like very controversial, very provocative sort of like post, because I don't think that's my style. I don't think that's who I am, and that is definitely not the kind of attitude that will make you successful in corporate. So yeah, for sure, I think this is definitely an area that I want to work on in the next 12 months. I think it is not overhauling, but I'll say that bringing more of the podcast vibe, right? Bringing more of the podcast vibes into the content, right? The in-depth element of the perspective, the comments that I'm sharing, as well as I think the energy and the vibe as well. I don't know, like when I speak to my corporate survivor members, either it's in the monthly mentoring call or even the one-on-one call, and you'll know this if you're part of the corporate survivor or you have signed up for the 30-day trial, like the vibe that you get, like the excitement, the vibe that you get in the program, particularly in the monthly mentoring calls, the one-on-one call, is like way beyond what you get in the podcast, and definitely like 100 times beyond what you see on Instagram and LinkedIn, which is, I think that there is a gap there. And I don't really want for that to be a gap, because I'm one person. I don't intend to sound different on different platforms. It's just, I feel like the moment I start writing, it's like the moment I start typing, I feel like the corporate MEI PHING comes in. So I sound very corporate. I'm not even sure if I'm explaining it correctly, but that's kind of like how I feel. And kind of like looking back at the post that I've made, I'm like, okay, this is very corporate-y. So I cannot write in a very corporate-y way right now. And it's very boring, it's very unexciting. And there's like no vibe and no energy. So anyway, I've rambled on for quite a bit already on the career part. So as I was saying at the beginning of this episode, when I started the year with my corporate survivor members, we actually talked about kind of like thinking about your life in 5 pillars. And those pillars are career, wealth, health, relationship, and lifestyle. So in the past 30 minutes, I basically talked about the career element, which is for me, it's a career coach, career mentor, and obviously running my career program, the Corporate Survivor. So the other categories, I'm just going to go through it very quickly, because obviously, this is a careers podcast after all. So the next category is wealth. So I'm going to cover these few categories in the context of a career, so that it's something that you can take on as well. So wealth, well, I think I'm doing okay. However, I think definitely that there is one thing that I intentionally decided, which is to not take any sponsorships or not, and to be more selective with collaborations. So of course, right, not taking sponsorships and keeping the podcast like ads free, there is a financial opportunity cost for sure. Like I could take money and just promote you a bunch of like stuff, which I don't want to. So I've declined. So this is, I think, an intentional decision on my part. I want to me, I see the podcast as my playground. It's a space for me to share all my experiences and all the insights, everything I've learned in the corporate world. It also gives me a chance to share with you that little tidbit of what I share with my members of my career program, right? For those of you who might not be as ready yet to get a taster of my style. So for me, the podcast serves like a very different purpose. And yes, I don't accept sponsorships. I don't take this kind of like collaboration sort of money. But as I said, this is intentional. But of course, there's going to be a financial hit. But that's something that I've decided that I want to keep this free. I want you to be able to kind of like listen to it and get inspired by it, share with a friend, come refer to it when you need it. That's my intention for it. So next category is health. So health is a category I don't think I did very well this year in general, because I started this year very sick. I started this year very sick from February. Then I realized that I'm actually anemic, so I needed to take care of myself. I needed to kind of like take medication, blah blah blah. I mean, we're not going to go into detail here, but I think it kind of like gave me some reflections on work as well, to also pace myself sometimes, because in this, I would say job, but I mean in this job, in this career right now, right? It's not like a 9 to 5. So it's like having your own. I mean, for me, like having my own business, running my own company, it's like 24/7, and sometimes it feels like 25/7, right? It's on and on and on, and there's a lot of like focus and attention that sometimes it's not so easy to have that, switch off. So this definitely has impacted my health for sure. And I think that the fact of is also like, getting older, and your body's not so efficient and stuff like that. So definitely my health was quite significantly impacted this year. I mean, not just, from my career, but it's just an accumulation of like bad habits. And I think at the beginning of this year, I think was it episode 205, where I talked about the life lessons I've learned, like, my 20s versus 30s, and how, when you're not so young anymore, right? There's a lot of like rah-rah stuff that used to like pull all-nighters in your 20s that doesn't quite work out in your 30s, and a lot of problems then kind of like start popping up in your 30s. So this is something for sure like I need to improve on, like work on in the next 12 months. So in terms of what I think I did better health-wise this year, honestly, I don't think that much. Maybe I started a little bit of exercise, but not enough. I'll say this year in terms of like health update is definitely more negative than positive. And I think this is kind of like a good reminder for myself to improve my health next year. Like I think exercise and like food, sleep, all these things, and just like being able to mentally relax. I think there's something that I want to take on for the next 12 months. Okay, moving on to, okay, what's the next category? Yeah, relationships. So I see relationships as, you have your friends and family, and to me, there are also the professional relationships. Obviously, right now I'm kind of like, doing the corporate survivor. I consider these, like I said, professional relationships. So I think for personal relationships, one thing I definitely have realized is that like, if something is important enough, then you make time, because everyone else is busy, right? I mean, I am in my mid 30s right now. Probably next year I'll move like closer to like, 40s, right? Like late 30s, like, getting closer to 40. So one thing I've realized is that like, everybody has like stuff to do, right? Everyone's busy with their life. Like, I mean, my friends are all like, many of them are married, they have kids, and like, our parents are getting older, and there's just a lot of stuff that's going on. And I think, it's a win to even meet a close friend like once a year. Like that's even if you can find time. But I think the good thing I've definitely noticed is that like when you're close to one another, even if you don't meet for a long time, you can still talk for hours. And I think that's something that is worth appreciating. It's worth appreciating for sure. Now, on to the other element around professional relationships. I think for me, for sure, it's boundaries. And this is something that I'm very aware of for a very long time, because there'll always be people who come to me telling me that, we can do this and that, or like they want to appear on a guest on a podcast, even though they have not even listened to the podcast at all. Or there are a lot of people who come for 1001 reasons and promise to do this and that, but after you collab certain things, then it's like, okay, I forgot about this and that. So my kind of like takeaway with professional collaborations is very similar to working relationships, right? Like your office working relationships, everything is professional, and there needs to be a lot of clarity, there needs to be a lot of black and white. And if things are not clear, then try to put it in black and white. Like I always feel like emails are so useful because it's kind of like buttoned down. So Anyway, I'm not going to go into detail about professional relationships, but I think like that's kind of like my high level takeaway. And in terms of like where I want to do better, for sure, continue to be selective with collab partners, because one thing also is that like right now, especially on social media, everything is very numbers driven. Like if you have the numbers, then it's like, okay, you're perfect. If not, then you need to pay me to do this and that. I mean, it's a hot mess there. But anyway, we're not going to get so much into that. Now, moving on to the last category. So, like I said, right, career, wealth, health, relationships, and lifestyle. So, the last part is lifestyle. Um, lifestyle, I think it's been good. I think the biggest thing I did this year, and it's something that I've previously done many years ago, but for sure is just like resetting and like decluttering my entire wardrobe, my entire home, and just making sure that there's not too much distractions around. And I find it personally super duper helpful. In terms of like lifestyle, I think also, I mean, I'm not a person that like has a lot of routine, and I think that when you're in a 9 to 5 job, there's a natural inbuilt routine that worked for me in the past. But right now, because I'm kind of like doing things on my own and I'm working from home most of the time, so the lack of routine is definitely something I need to improve on next year, because right now it's kind of like hunky dory. It's like whenever I'm in the mood, but it's like when you're waiting for motivation to strike, most of the time motivation doesn't strike. And while some people think that like my job, podcast, everything looks really fun, but when you think about wanting to share certain thoughts and stuff, like it's still things that you need to kind of like think about, prepare, like mentally get ready as well. So there's just stuff that's in, I would say that I think a little bit more structure, a little bit more routine to my lifestyle will definitely help me a lot. Because otherwise, I'm a person that is like it's like all or nothing. It's like obsess or don't care. I'm that kind of person. It's like 0 or 100, don't care, or 100% crazy obsessed. So I think moving closer to that middle ground would be good for me. And this is definitely something that I want to take note next year. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to like fully change it, because I've always been like this, ever since I was young, ever since I remember, I've always been like this. So I don't think I'll be able to change it, nor do I want to like fully change. But I think a little bit more routine, um, a little bit more structure would be very good. And that could start with the days that are designated to record the podcast versus me recording the podcast whenever I feel like I'm in the mood. And sometimes when I'm not in the mood, then I don't record an episode, which then ties back to the first thing I talked about at the beginning of this episode, in which one thing I want to improve on with the podcast is consistency. So that's my that's my 2024 year in review. It's not particularly okay. For sure, it's not a very well thought out episode. But like I said, I feel like it's so important for me to reflect for myself and actually to have sort of I don't want to say an artifact, but a point that I can refer to at the end of next year, so that I can continue to reassess what I've done well and what I could do better. Because even though it can feel like a little bit uncomfortable, but I always believe that if you are ready to reflect and to recognize your mistakes and recognize things that you could have done better in the most honest way possible, that is real growth. And it doesn't mean that you need to fix everything immediately. You don't have to fix everything tomorrow or next week, but just being aware that these may be mistakes. This may be things that could be better, that could be improved on. I think it kind of like reminds me, or remind you that, hey, it's one step at a time. And even if I can't fix this in the next few months, but I know that this is something that I want to work on. And when I'll prioritize accordingly, right? And then when the time that I get that is allocated for this, then I'm going to work on it. So I started this episode by saying that I recorded this episode for myself, for my Corporate Survival members, and for you, a member of my community online. So if you're here, I really, really want to thank you for following me and for being a listener of the Corporate Survivor podcast, or even being a member of the Corporate Survivor Career Program. I'm really, really thankful to you. And it's because of you I get to do what I do right now. So I'm going to wish you all the best in the new year. And I hope that all your dreams come true. And I'll see you in the new year. Bye.